Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Live with Love. I'm Julie Roginsky here with Gretchen Carlson. Gretchen, we are on the countdown to the release of the Epstein files, or maybe not.
Yeah, there's been so much breaking news over the last couple of days that we're not really honing in on that. I saw Representative Thomas Massey, who's one of the Republicans, very much interested in these files. He posted something today on Twitter saying, look, it's, the countdown's on, but I haven't seen a lot of chatter because we're talking about Australia and we're talking about Brown and we're talking about Rob Reiner. I mean, rightfully so on all of those. So I don't know. Have we changed our opinions from last week about what's going to happen?
Nope. I still don't think he's going to do it, or he's going to come up with an excuse. But while we're sitting here waiting for one of us to be proven right, we have some news of our own, which is that we here at Lift Our Voices, people might know, passed a federal law that you, Gretchen, had worked on since virtually the day that you left Fox News back in 2016 to eradicate forced arbitration for sexual harassment and sexual assault claims, and allowing people to actually have their day in court rather than being shunted into the secret chamber of arbitration, which is what happens consistently. 82% of all American workers are bound by forced arbitration. You're probably bound by forced arbitration, whether you know it or not. Anyway, this law passed, and we knew when it passed that it was going to have incredible effects and a great impact in the American workplace, but we didn't know exactly how extensive that would be. So we decided to do an analysis and do a study of that. We partnered with a wonderful professor at UC Davis School of Law named David Horton, and he conducted the study for us. And it just showed an incredible, there are just so many takeaways here, Gretchen. I don't know if you want me to go through them or you want to take a stab at it, but it's starting to have a real impact on people having their day in court.
I'll just do a little brief synopsis and then you can go down the list. So what he did was, the law passed almost 4 years ago now. The anniversary will be March 2nd of 26. And so Professor Horton went through all of the public-facing cases that he could find with regard to sexual misconduct in the workplace that were public. And he found 201. And I think the overwhelming headline here is that people are receiving justice when they're not forced into secrecy. I mean, it kind of sounds like duh, but it's been so vicious, the cycle over the last 40 years, as these things have just become boilerplate language in contracts that people have no idea what they're signing. And then something bad happens to them and then they can't come forward. They find that out when they go to complain. They find out that their hands are tied like this. And so we knew that people would be able to get more justice. The interesting thing is that there haven't been a ton more cases, which is what opponents of this thought. They thought, oh, well, if you let people sue in an open court, which by the way is your Seventh Amendment right, that then we would start to see this onslaught of cases and people would just make up shit, or there would just be so many more people that would be willing to go down the path because it's been made easier for them. The first thing we found out is that that's not true. And we've seen that in other things we've been working on too. Main reason, Julie, as you and I know, it ain't fun to come forward. And number two, it's incredibly difficult to prove these cases. Every state has their own sort of ceiling and high bar of evidence that you have to have. And those laws still apply, even though this federal law allowed you to not have to go to arbitration. So it's still really difficult. So 201 cases that he looked at. I'd say the last thing I'll say before you jump in is that more than half of those were thrown out immediately almost because the action or bad behavior happened before March 2nd, 2022. And the way this law works is that you have to have come forward on that day or after. You can't have preceded the law date with your case. So you're stuck in arbitration March 1st, 2022. So I think what we saw was that lawyers and clients tried to push that to see how much that would stand in court. And what they found is that most judges said, nope, the law passed March 2nd, 2022. If you came forward before that and you were thrown into arbitration, you're stuck in arbitration. But anything moving forward, we saw quite dramatic results.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about this too is that these are just things that were arbitrated or argued in a court of law. I should say arbitrated is absolutely not the right word. There are so many more where companies didn't even bother taking this to court because they understood the law is the law and they have to abide by it, irrespective of what they put in their contracts or onboarding documents when people first went to work for them. So I think that's also something that shows that culture really is changing. It really is. And it's going to take a while. And it's only been, I mean, as much as we think 2022 seems like 1,000 years ago, considering what's happened in the last 3 years. But what's fascinating about this is that as the years go by and these claims mature, you're not going to be able to throw them out because they took place prior to the enactment of the law. So it's, something that I think is really, really powerful for people to consider. We believe strongly. Yeah.
No,
go ahead.
Keep going. No, well, keep going.
Yeah, we believe strongly that if predators know that they can't just sweep things under the rug, they might think twice about engaging in bad behavior. And I think that's something that's really critical for people to understand. This is not just about coming forward. This is not just about, as Gretchen mentioned, that is not fun. I mean, both of us did it, and we can tell you it is not fun. It is not about suing people, because that's also not fun. It's about changing culture in the workplace and changing behavior. And the best way to do that is to make it clear that if you do something really bad, people are going to find out about it because you can't sweep it under the rug anymore. And that's really what I think the best effects of this law are not the legal effects, it's the cultural effect.
Well, we always said that in passing the law that it was going to get you out of the secret of arbitration, which needed to happen for justice. But we also, we always said that the beauty of this law was that it was dually pronged in the sense that it was going to have this cultural effect of what you just explained. If people know you can talk, maybe they just not harass you anymore. And I think that is a very important part of this. The only other thing I'd say is that, just back to what I said earlier about people thought there'd be this onslaught of cases. Well, the thing is that if you that these 201 cases that lawyers tried to get them in, right, and they were denied because it happened before March 2nd, 2022, we're actually going to see probably less cases moving forward because lawyers will also learn that they can't bring cases that happened before, right? I mean, it's an interesting sort of dynamic of, I don't know, we could argue, I guess, that we could see more cases as well because more people and lawyers have an understanding that they can use this law. But my guess would be that we might see a few less cases now that that's been decided, that the courts aren't going to change their mind on that part of it.
I hope so. I mean, the courts, it's interesting because I was speaking to a lawyer who has a client here in New York City about this just a few weeks ago. And he was saying, some lawyers and some judges, in some jurisdictions are more liberal, quote unquote, than others on these cases. But what's interesting is, and I think this is important to note, is it's not just about sexual misconduct. If you have a sexual misconduct claim as part of a larger claim against racial discrimination or age discrimination or anything else, they'll allow it in. And I think that's something that's critical for people to understand, that the effects of this law, and I have to thank Congress for this, and really thank, he gets a lot of grief, but thank Lindsey Graham for this, who really spearheaded this along with Kirsten Gillibrand. They did something for workers that I don't even think most workers are aware of, because most workers were not even aware that they had this provision in their contract, and they still have this provision in their contract, much like, you say this yourself, and I was not aware, by the way. When I went to go sue, I talk about this all the time. You had noticed it in your contract. You asked your agent about it. Your agent was like, this is the way of the world, and just move on. And you did, and it ended up having this horrible effect. I did not even know what forced arbitration was, so that when I went to go try to sue and speak to my lawyers about this, the first question they asked was whether I had an arbitration clause in my contract. And I didn't even know what they were talking about. I had to send them my contract so they could take a look. So, and both you and I talk about how we're pretty well educated and read through things, but just never occurred to me. So I luckily did not have one. So most people, I think, are not aware of what's happening, and they're not aware of this impact, this incredible impact that this law has had and will have on them should they need it. Yeah. And that's key, should they need it. But
right. And our main goal is now just to try to get this word out. And if you're just joining us, we're talking about this amazing analysis that Lift Our Voices did with Professor Horton at UC Davis, who is an expert on arbitration, to see the impact of the law that we helped pass almost 4 years ago now that means you don't have to go to the secret chamber of arbitration if you face sexual misconduct at work. And we would just say that of the cases, pretty much, of the cases that he was able to find and study, the people are getting justice. The people are getting justice. And if you want to see the justice that they're getting, go to our website at liftourvoices.org. And at the top, you'll see #LoveJustice, which is our video testimonial campaign that we have been putting together with the help of Emily, who works with us, who knows how to do these kinds of things very well, and we don't. So these testimonials are unbelievable stories about how these people didn't be shunted. They weren't shunted into secrecy. They were allowed to go to court and they got justice. And the unbelievable emotions that come through on these videos, and how thankful they are that this law had changed to help them. And this is why we do what we do, Julie. I mean, it's about the people that we're affecting, and there's millions of them out there that we'll never see on video or get to meet, but we know that we're helping them. And so, we want to continue to do this study on an annual basis to see how many more people we're potentially helping.
Yeah. This is going to sound a little hokey, and I don't really mean it to, but it is the holiday season, so I'm going to say this. You and I, our cases are done, right? Like, it's over for us, good and bad, right? On the one hand, we brought incredible attention to this. We resolved our issues with Fox. You and I are both bound by NDAs at Fox, and that's up to Fox, and not just Fox, but the other entities with whom we had to sign them. To either be released or not released. But there are millions of people out there, as we say, who have no idea that they're bound by these laws and bound by these clauses. And, if you're one of them and you've used the Speak Out Act, or you've used the Ending Forced Arbitration, Sexual Assault and Sexual Harassment Act to get justice, we'd love to hear from you. Please contact us. Contact us at info@liftourvoices.org, or just contact either of us through the Lift Our Voices website, and just tell us about it, because we'd love to feature you in our Love Justice series. I think it's important for people to understand what's the success of this, because it gives inspiration to others that they can get justice too. Well,
in fact, you just talked about that, but from Instagram, we have invoked the Speak Out Act in the 11th Circuit. And we know Rhonda, and it's on appeal, and she's had a long-standing story, which for privacy reasons, we won't get into all the details, other than we know how this works. It's not just something you snap your fingers and suddenly it's fine and dandy and everything's solved. But so glad to hear that you are able to use that. So the Speak Out Act, we have not done a study on that federal law yet. That passed in December of 2022. So we have just marked the 3-year anniversary of that. A little tougher to study, actually, to see how many people are using it, because by virtue of an NDA, it means you can't say you had one and you can't talk to people about it. So it's hard to find people to study. But we do know, based on Rhonda reaching out to us right now, people are using the Speak Out Act. So what does that mean in a nutshell? 1/3 of all Americans sign NDAs on their first day of work. They have no idea that they're signing away their rights to be able to talk about anything that happens to them at work. They think it's just, trade secrets for their company, which we agree with. Companies should be able to do that. But these have become so expansive. So the Speak Out Act means that if you face sexual misconduct at any time of your employment and you signed one of those, you don't have to abide by it up until a dispute arises, which is probably when your case would be going to court. So you can own your voice during that whole entire time. That means you can warn other people. That means you can get together with other people to see if you have a similar story. That means that you can go to the press and talk about it. So it is a huge advantage for people, because Julie, you and I, the number one question we get from people after they've signed an NDA and resolved their case or whatever the case may be, when do I own my voice? And the story is, if you sign that thing, never. Yeah. So, and we've got another comment here from Beth. The law gives employees their constitutional rights back. Exactly. Yeah. Both of them do, but especially the Ending Forced Arbitration of Sexual Assault and Sexual Harassment Act, your Seventh Amendment right to be able to go to court as an American citizen. She goes on to say, when employees first realize they have lost their rights, they're often shocked, heartbroken, and helpless. Totally true. The law gives justice to employees. Thank you for your work. Thank you. Thank you so much, Beth. I'll just share my own personal story about how heartbreaking it was. I had gathered, well, hypothetically, I had gathered a lot of evidence. And when I presented all of it to my lawyers, they looked at my contract and they said, we got some really bad news for you. And I was like, what? And they're like, you can't sue anyone at Fox News. And I said, why not? And they said, because you have something called a forced arbitration clause in your contract. And that means that the minute that you go to complain and they know about this, you're going to be shunted into secrecy and nobody's ever going to hear from you ever again. And you're going to go the way of the world of thousands of other people over the last 40 years since companies started using this, which means you're going to get fired. You're going to go off into pasture and nobody's ever going to hear from you ever again, which is what's been happening to people, which is why this law is so important. That is why, thanks to the brilliance of my lawyers, we sued my alleged perpetrator, the CEO and chairman, Roger Ailes, personally under a New York state law that he had violated my human rights in the way in which he undignified, in which he treated me, allegedly. And that's how we were able to make my case public. Had I not been working in New York, had not been a law like that on the books in whatever state I might have been in, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. We might not have the Me Too movement. I mean, all of this stuff would have been in secrecy. So I understand the heartbreak of finding out that you can't own your own story and then you have no recourse. But these laws are helping people to be able to have recourse.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really critical to appreciate. And we're going to keep going. Just so that people know, we're going to keep going. We're not going to stop until everybody.
Well, we have another bill, but it's, it's a little bit stalled right now with the Trump administration, but it's called the Protecting Older Americans Act. And this is the next step to follow what we call the EFAA. It's a shortened version of the Ending Forced Arbitration thing we're talking about. This would mean that age discrimination, that you would not be shunted into silence in forced arbitration for age discrimination. Quite honestly, it was the next thing we could get both parties to agree on. Let's tackle this one. Look, we've got a long way to go. Race discrimination, LGBTQ rights discrimination, religious discrimination, disability, but age it is. So this bill has passed out of the Senate Judiciary and Congress. We're hoping that'll happen again. Let's see what happens in the midterms, Julie. If the House flips, this
maybe
would for sure pass. And then let's see what happens in the Senate. So, we keep pushing full steam ahead and building these relationships behind the scenes, because you just don't know when government's going to flip and when you're going to be able to get more stuff done.
Yeah, and I think people may not realize, and I talked about Lindsey Graham and Kirsten Gillibrand earlier, but you also have people who, when they're not in front of the cameras trying to score points for or against each other, working together to get good stuff done. And one of the things that they're working on to get good stuff done, as we saw, were the two bills that we already helped pass, which is the forced arbitration law and also the Speak Out Act. And same thing here, right? You have the same cohort of people working together on both sides of the aisle to make this Protecting Older Americans Act a priority. It's something that I think is lost a lot of times in the cable news world that we live in, but they are working together. And it's a question of what leadership decides to do. And it's frankly you have chairmen and chairwomen of committees that have a lot of authority. So that's why we're not going to get anywhere probably under Jim Jordan in the House, because he's on the Judiciary Committee. He's the chair of the Judiciary Committee. But if it flips, I don't know who the new ranking member, well, the ranking member now is Jerry Nadler. I don't know who the new chair is going to be once Jerry Nadler steps down at the end of this term. But it's possible that this can go very quickly. And then, of course, it has to end up at the president's desk and see what happens there. But
yeah, my guess is that it would be Jamie Raskin, who's been a huge proponent of these bills. In fact, he was one of the people quoted that the first law we're talking about, the arbitration, is the biggest labor law change in the last 100 years. Yeah. So if you're watching this, and that just puts it in perspective of how significant this is. And we're really proud of this. I'm looking at some other comments. I'm studying this for workplace bullying too. It's terrible. I know. We hear from so many people, and we're very hopeful that is also going to be something that will be addressed as we move forward. Another commenter says, I love this point you're making, that one way we see the law is clearly working is fewer cases. It's discouraging predation because they know they will be held legally accountable. Yeah. It stops the behavior, which is actually our end goal here. Because we always say changing culture is harder even than passing bipartisan laws, and that's saying a lot. Because, the idea that even the law exists and the behavior is still happening, it's two separate things. So if the law can help people justice and stop the behavior, it's a win-win.
Yeah.
Look, we could digress on what's happened with the elimination of DEI and just people thinking about this in general. And I think we got these laws passed when we did, Julie, because as we're talking about, this analysis is showing that it's helping people get justice. And we knew that would be the case. And to your point earlier, I think what's so great is that if we're also seeing judges rule that if your case is sexual harassment and sex discrimination because you're a woman, for example, and so it's two things, we're seeing that judges are saying that our law keeps you out of arbitration for both of them.
Yeah,
that's huge.
Huge.
Because that means that you don't have to bifurcate the case so that you can stay out of arbitration for the sex harassment claim, but you have to go to arbitration for the sex discrimination claim. That's crazy. Well, so the idea that judges are saying, hey, you can, again, for the critics, they're going to say, oh, well, people are going to just make up claims then about sexual harassment, even when it's just
claims. You guys stop. I want to just say that this is such a shitty process to go through. It's so god awful and horrible.
Yeah.
That the vast, 99 point, I don't know, some vast majority of people do not make up these claims. Trust us, it's not fun. It's not fun. Nobody's making up anything. It's just hard, right? Yeah. Are there going to be outliers out there, one or two or three that you can come up with, some high profile ones? Sure. But for the vast majority of people, trust us, this is not fun. I promise you, neither Gretchen or I started our career dreaming about suing anybody. So It's just, it's just, that narrative really upsets me. And I will also say, if you look at the EOC and you look, which no longer is releasing data, I don't think, but back when they did release data under the previous administration, you had a much higher rate of Black women suing for, or trying to sue for sexual harassment or assault. And no surprise, race always I shouldn't say always, but race has a higher propensity of playing into it. And so the good news about this law is that if you are somebody who's been racially discriminated against, as well as sexually harassed or assaulted, the race claim doesn't have to go into forced arbitration now. Because people don't just stop at, hey, I want to grab your, what? They also probably use a racial component or slur or something in there while they're doing it or following up on that. And this is not a situation that's bifurcated most of the time. A lot of it goes hand in hand. So,
right.
You know,
well, I think that if people want to learn more, they can go to our website. We have a dedicated page to this study that is really, really important. So liftourvoices.org. And we hope that everyone has a wonderful holiday season. As we started, we will end. Let's see if on Friday the Epstein files are released. That'll be the biggest question of the week, I think. So we will see what happens on Friday, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to say about it either way.
Little bet going here, so we'll see which one of us is right. Okay, everybody, have a great holiday season. Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all the good things to you and your families, and we'll see you early next year. Bye, everybody.